Good afternoon, Baruch Marzel. Thank you for being my guest on Cup of Joe. Baruch Marzel, you're a resident of Hebron, the Tel Rumida neighborhood. You've devoted your whole life to performance of Chesed for Klal Yisrael, strengthening the Yishuv of Hebron, particularly education there. You're also a student of Rabbi Meir Kahane, I understand. And you've been involved as a political activist for many, many years. I want to start with a little Dvar Torah. We just read in last week's Parsha, in Parshat Shlach, that Kalev, that the Torah says that Avdi Kalev Ekev Hayta Ruach Acheret Imo, that he was given Hebron. So, it doesn't mention Yoshua. Why wasn't Yoshua given Hebron? So the Nitziv explains that Kalev went, in order to show his emunah and bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he went dafka to the places that were more dangerous, to show that he wasn't afraid. And I think that's something that characterizes your career. You were never afraid, not afraid of your political opponents here, not afraid of our enemies. And it's a pleasure and honor to have you here at the studio.
If I could add to the Dvar Torah, what Rabbi Kahane used to say, that Kalev also, it's written, Vayahas Kalev et Ha'am. He's the one that got up first and said, quiet, I want to tell you the real story. And Yoshua joined him to be the first one to jump into the fire and to do what you're supposed to do, to be the first. That's always something different.
Right. So, how did you start your career? You moved here. You moved here from Boston, I understand.
Well, when I moved from Boston, the only career was with Pampers because I was 6 weeks old. And I couldn't stand Boston. It was disgusting.
Even as a 6-week-old.
I made Aliyah. My mother said I cried the whole time and made in my pants. I was so bad in Boston. I was back to Boston as a shaliach of the army, and I understood why I didn't stay there. Rabbi Kahane was in my bar mitzvah. I was active before my bar mitzvah. And the first time I was arrested is when I was 13 years old, protesting against Kissinger when he came here to pressure the Israeli government after the Yom Kippur War. I heard as a youngster what Rabbi Kahane did in America, and I liked what I heard, and the minute he came to Israel, I joined.
Were your parents connected to him in the United States?
My father and mother were his madrichim in Bnei Akiva.
Mm-hmm.
And
his counselors in Bnei Akiva.
Yeah, and
but they moved
him and his wife
in Brooklyn or in New York. They moved from New York?
My father lived in Chicago, and my mother in Boston. But both of them came to camp in New York to build up the branch in New York. Uh-huh. That's where they were. They met Rabbi Levinger, Rabbi Kahane,
oh, wow.
Rabbi Waldman. Uh-huh. A lot of very, very special Jews that were under them in Bnei Akiva.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about now in the 1960s, 50s, 60s?
50, 58, 50, 56.
Uh-huh. So you had a family connection to Rabbi Kahane even before you moved to Israel.
Yeah, but that's the connection between me and Rabbi Kahane was, I made the connection. In the 7th grade, I made already the yearly work on the JDL and Rabbi Kahane.
You mean as a school project?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I was already started to be active in Gush Emunim and all the building of settlements. Elon Moreh and all the other
Together with
settlements.
Hanan Porat,
With Hanan Porat, Rabbi Levinger, and all the
Daniela
rest.
Weiss.
Daniela Weiss, I met her. When I was in the beginning of the building of the first settlement in Binyamin and Shomron, Ofra. Daniela Weiss came from Elkanah to visit us. That's the first time I met Daniela Weiss. Afterwards, when we built Kedumim in the Shomron, she was already one of the head of the Kedumim, and I came there as a volunteer to help her to build the settlement.
So we hosted Daniela and her assistant Lital here at the podcast. And they were telling us a little bit about their organization, Nachala. Nachala, as you probably know, is trying to promote settlement in the Shomron and also in Gaza after the war. What do you tell us about, how do you view settlement, Jewish settlement, as the importance of Jewish settlement strategically in terms of our faith, in terms of our vision for the state of Israel? How important is Jewish settlement to that enterprise?
Until yesterday, I visited a group of activists, my activists that are trying to build this Elei Gaza to go back to Gaza and build their settlements. They are youngsters that are in a place a mile away from Gaza, waiting to get the permit to go back. And they asked me, does it look realistic? I remember when I used to go from Jerusalem towards Shechem, towards Kedumim, there was no Jewish settlements. Everything was empty. And when I heard people like Uri Elitzur and other people talking about all the mountains full of settlements, full of Jews, I was young. I wanted to believe everything is going to be. And today, when I take a car from Hebron towards Shechem, towards Yitzhar, towards the Shomron, there are hundreds of thousands of Jews living on these hilltops, and not because of the Israeli government. We never had an Israeli government that really pushed settlements. We always had to fight for building settlements, and not because of the support of anyone from outside, because of Mesirut Nefesh, dedication of the Jews here that understood that this is the heart of Eretz Israel. I live in Tel Umeida, and a lot of times people ask me, why do you live in the center of Hebron? In the center of Hebron, what do you have to do among 150,000 Hamas members? Hebron is twice as more Hamas than Gaza. 7 out of 7 members of parliament that were elected the only democratic elections in Hebron were Hamas members. PLO didn't have one seat. Why do you live inside Hebron? What happened? And I tell them that I live where Jewish history started 3,800 years ago in Tel Umeida. That's where most of Sefer Bereshit, from Lech Lecha till the end, was written where I live. Under my trailer was the palace of King David. This is the place that Avraham Avinu, Kodesh Baruch Hu, came to Avraham Avinu, says, Kum italech ba'aretz l'ruka l'ruchba k'lechet. Walk around and buy the land. Look around and everything you'll see will be yours. The promise on the land of Eretz Yisrael was given where I live. And where I live, Jews lived for 3,800 years, almost all the time there were Jews there. 4 times they were expelled after 20, 40 or 70 years, they came back. And the land that we live on is Jewish land. It was bought 200 years ago by the Sephardi community of Hebron. And I tell the people, if I don't have a right to live on Jewish land, where Jewish history started, when we got the promise on the land of Eretz Yisrael, where there is the longest Jewish history, Yerushalayim is 3,000 years old. Hebron is 3,800 years of Jewish history. We have to understand that the right to live in Tel Aviv and Haifa and Yerushalayim comes from where I live in Hebron. History started in Judea and Samaria. Tel Aviv is new, 200 years old. Everything, all our connection to Eretz Yisrael is Hebron, Yerushalayim, Bet El, Shechem, Dotan. All these places were the places that our history started. And if we don't have a right to these places, we don't have a right to any other place.
When did you first move to Hebron?
I got married 40 years ago. And got married in Me'arat HaMachpelah, next to Me'arat HaMachpelah. And stayed there in a broken down trailer. And 2 months later, they looked for families to go up to Tel Umeida, to live in Tel Umeida. We volunteered. Mm-hmm. And we lived there for half a year with no running water, no sewage system, no electricity. And we were the happiest Jews in the world to be in the place that Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, the tribes, Kalev and Yefune, Otniel ben Knaz. It's something that what the Jews dreamed for 2,000 years. What? We want to see with our eyes. Kodesh Baruch Hu, please, we want to see with our eyes. We're coming back to Eretz Yisrael. That's what's happening. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what were happening to us. I wake up every morning, read the air that the forefathers and mothers breathed. I go to daven every day in Me'arat HaMachpelah.
What did your parents say when you made this decision? Were they in favor?
They tried to say, maybe try to start in Yerushalayim.
But they must have been very idealistic as well, because in those days...
I told them that passing from Boston and Chicago to Yerushalayim is a lot more drastic than passing from Yerushalayim to Hebron.
Right.
They understood.
I mean, in those days, it wasn't so popular to move to Israel. Yeah. Now we're seeing a little bit more of Aliyah from North America. But in those days, certainly not. So they must have been...
people thought they wouldn't have what to eat here. There was a lack of food in Eretz Yisrael. But they decided that they were getting married and coming to Eretz Yisrael. That's what they did.
Mm-hmm. And is that something that they got from their education? And did your parents grow up with a Torah education in America that led them to... want to make Aliyah?
A Torah education and a lot of friends. Mm-hmm. All of their friends made Aliyah together.
Right. I think so. What year was that they moved in?
58.
Wow. And they came with a lot of friends from North America.
They came and my father started Yeshivat Netiv Meir, and afterwards was the principal of the Chorev Institute in Yerushalayim. And till the last day, they lived in Beit Vegan, Yerushalayim. And all the time, I learned from my parents till this day, my mother, that still lives till 120, they all the time looked for how to contribute to Am Yisrael, how to help Am Yisrael. And that's what we're doing. I get up in the morning and I think, how could I help Am Yisrael, the Geulah of Am Yisrael?
How do you think we can increase, first of all, how do you see Aliyah in general from North America? And do you think it's slower than it should be? What can we do to increase Aliyah from North America? It seems like the religious Jews there are very comfortable Lakewood is growing. The Torah communities in certainly in New York and other big cities are growing, and they don't seem to have any drive to move here.
As a student of Rabbi Kahane, that was killed when he went there only to talk about Aliyah Eretz Yisrael. That's when he was murdered in New York. As a student of Rabbi Kahane, one of the most important issues that I try to deal with is bringing Aliyah Eretz Yisrael, talking with the people, every group that I meet, and I meet a few groups every day to come to Hebron. I talk with them about Aliyah. I think that what Rabbi Kahane said 50 years ago, that black clouds are going to go over Europe and over America, that's happening. And unfortunately, the biggest shlichei Aliyah will be the anti-Semites in America and Europe. Things are going to be very bad in America in the next future. And that's when, if the economy collapses in America, the blame will be on the Jews that ran the economy in America for years. That's what Rabbi Kahane said 50 years ago. Today, we see that he was right also on this issue. I think that Jews... First, I think that our government isn't doing enough about this issue. I had a meeting with the Minister of Aliyah, with the Sofer, only to push him, to bring Aliyah from all over. I said, I'm ready to bring you hundreds of people that are ready to volunteer, to help. Build an army that goes all over the world and tell Jews, time to come to Eretz Yisrael. Now it's the time. Mm-hmm. We won the lottery to be born in this generation that thousands of years Jews dreamed to be in Eretz Yisrael, to be in Yerushalayim, to be in Hebron, to go to the Kotel, to Har HaBayit, to Me'arat HaMachpelah. That's what Jews dreamed. We won the lottery when we were born. I don't know why we had the zchut to be born in this generation. Maybe because of the big price we paid in the Holocaust. But we won the lottery. We have to cash the ticket. Mm-hmm. A Jew wants to be part of the game, wants to see Mashiach on television. If you want to see Mashiach on television, we are the army of Mashiach. Every Jew that comes here is helping Mashiach, helping the Geulah of Am Yisrael. Everyone that stays there is a Jew that ran away from the battle, a Jew that the Gemara writes, En lo Eloah, doime she'en lo Eloah, doesn't believe in God. Because Baruch Hu tells us Eretz Yisrael is the Nodeh lecha, we say it Birkat HaMazon every day. נוידע לך השם אלוקינו על שהנחלת על אבותינו ארץ חמדה טוב ורחובו. Because Baruch Hu says this is the best place. You think you know better? You think Lakewood is better? That's kfirah. You don't believe in God. You think God doesn't know what's happening in Lakewood?
So I want to touch on this because this is something that always intrigued me about Rav Kahane. Rav Kahane came from a very traditional Torah background. He learned in the Mir Yeshiva in Brooklyn. His father was a rabbi of a shul in Brooklyn. And you can certainly say, and correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, that he didn't see eye to eye with the traditional, the Gedolim, the traditional rabbinic leadership in America, and even here in Eretz Yisrael. How do you, and I want to also get to what happened to you in politics. How did Rav Kahane and you, as his successor, or a student succeeding him, how do you deal with the fact that the rabbinic leadership doesn't always see eye to eye with your vision?
Well, we spoke about Parashat Shlach Lecha for last week, and Kalev and Yefune and Yoshua were alone. Most of the Gdoilim, most of the big rabbis, as Rashi says, Rashei Sanadraot, the Gdoilim of the generation were Meraglim, made the biggest sin in the generations. Kalev and Yefune was alone. Yoshua joined. But Rabbi Kahane was a big, big Torah scholar. And a lot of rabbis that met him says, you're right. He says, why don't you join? He says, I can't because of this. I can't because of that. I can't. I want to be the chief rabbi. I want to be this. I want to get, they'll throw me out of the job. They this. Rabbi Kahane was a brave person. Never took bribery, never took money from the government, never, they tried to bribe him, they tried to buy him, he never agreed. And he was, as a brave rabbi, said what he believes in. And when we said Rabbi Kahane, it was a big campaign. Rabbi Kahane was right. He was furious at us. He says, well, Rabbi, I said there's something that I say that I started. Everything that I say is from the Torah. I'll show you every place is from the Torah. And
he used to challenge Rabbanim to a debate. Any rabbi that wants to come and debate me on whether I invite them to come.
They didn't have a chance. They didn't have a chance because Rabbi Kahane, they knew he was right. Most of the rabbis knew he was right. So there are Haredi rabbis that say we're in Golos. You're right, but we're in Golos. We cannot say so. Rabbi Kahane could have showed him the facts. That the Gemara in Sotah writes, when you see Eretz Israel blooming, with giving out the fruits so well, and Am Yisrael coming back, En lecha ketz v'gula mizeh. There's nothing more to see that we're in the time of Gula. And if that's not the situation today, someone that doesn't see this today, he's blind.
Right. So do you think that's going on now? And now one of the hot subjects is Giyus Charedim. Now, Giyus Charedim can be taken, in a vacuum. Yes, we should draft Chared, we shouldn't, the law, but it's also a broader subject of how do you view Am Yisrael's mission here now in Eretz Yisrael? And do you think there's something, what's going on there in terms of the conflict between, let's say, Gedolei Yisrael and the Haredi Gedolei Yisrael who are against it, and the other and the opposition, or people saying that why should there be an exemption for Torah learning? Isn't this considered a Melchemet Mitzvah? How do you see that in terms of the old machloket between Rav Kahane and his followers and the rabbinic establishment?
Well, I think that Rabbi Kahane would say today that everyone that learns should continue to learn Torah, and afterwards, after he stops learning, go to the army. It's very important that we'll have a lot of Torah scholars. I went to the army. My kids went to the army. I was wounded in Lebanon. My kid was wounded in Gaza. We think the army is a holy army. Everyone has to go to the army if he's not learning. But the problem is that it became a political issue. When I hear Yair Lapid talking about all the Haredim go to the army, I remember that when I was in Lebanon, in the front line, he ran away from the army to be something in a newspaper, wrote in a newspaper of the army, even though he had a better talent than me to be a soldier. He didn't serve in the army for me. Lieberman was also had a job in the army. And all these people want the Haredim to stop being Haredim. They want that the Haredi wouldn't have a power. It's a political issue. And
But
they're not looking for the good of the army.
Okay.
And that's why if you want Haredim to come to the army, you have to say, we want soldiers in the army. Every soldier will get what he needs to be a soldier. We'll do everything we can for us to have a woman soldier singing in front of a soldier isn't more important than a singer will sing that will have these soldiers in the army. All kind of things that the army does today against Haredim going into the army. The army has to change, has to open the doors to give the Haredim, to give my kids what we need in the army, and not all kind of Western ideology that wants
woke ideology.
Yeah, woke ideology that isn't connected to the army. The army has to win the war. That's the only issue an army needs, to protect Am Yisrael and to win wars. And today, that's not the main goal in the army. The army wants to educate us. If they want to educate me, so the Haredi person doesn't want his kids being educated by people like people that are running the army.
Right, but we all, first of all, I would say two things. Just because there's hypocrisy on the side of the left doesn't mean that we should compromise our ideology. If we think that this is milchemet mitzvah and there is no patur to sit and learn rather than maybe for a temporary, but to have a blanket exemption, then how can we as true Torah Jews support that kind of exemption that we know doesn't really...
I didn't support, but I understand, and I'm connected very strongly to a lot of the Haredi rabbis. I had a project that I tried to sell to the Haredi rabbis how to bring youngsters that don't learn Torah to help the army, to serve in the army, to do things that are very important for the army. Today, after it became a political campaign, anti-Haredi, I can't do anything with this thing because no one wants to listen. The minute it's a fight, it's not something positive that you want to help the youngsters to go into the army, to give them what they need. If they need a mikveh, they'll get a mikveh. If they need a kosher badatz food, they'll get badatz food. If they need a base that doesn't have women soldiers in it, and so they should get anything they want.
Right, but
the minute they go in and the army starts
try to educate them.
It starts to educate them. It changes all the promises that they gave them. And they say, you promised us there wouldn't be women officers, and we got a women officer. These are things that make this very important issue very hard to do.
Right. So I mean, just my suggestion, and I this really is a suggestion that requires input from Haredi leadership, is what Rav Goldvich did in the 1970s or 80s when he came to the army, and he said, we have students, they want to learn Torah, they also want to serve in the army. Let's set up a system. Why can't there be? I understand for a Haredi family, the most important thing is that their son comes out of the army Haredi. I understand that. Why can't they have Haredi Hesder Yeshivot where they can have everything completely blocked off the way they want it, and do and have a system like that? It requires some.
You're right. Theoretically, you're right, 100%. But when you see the way the leadership of the army deals with us, the Tilumi, people that we see today that the major, most of the people that die in the war were killed in the war from our the Tilumi people. And the people are very devoted to army and run to the army and want to do miluim, and still the army doesn't let our officers become part of the leadership of the army, doesn't let us, doesn't give us all the rights that we want in terms of religious right. And if an officer will leave a concert because there's a woman singing there, he'll be punished. All kind of things that the Haredi Jew looks from the side and says, if that's what they do to these devoted people that run to the army and serve the army, what would they do to us if we go in? And we have to bring him to trust, to bring a leadership in the army that has to be changed, because the leadership of the army failed in this war, before the war and on the war. And maybe the new leadership of the army will be a leadership that the Haredi youngsters will trust. I think that it'll bring a massive group of them to recruit. But if you don't trust someone, it's very hard to sell.
Right. Now, how can we change the leadership of the army? Because every time it seems like, as you mentioned, politics gets involved in everything. Every time the right wing calls for the army leadership to resign because of their contribution or their failure in the years or months leading up to Simchat Torah, we're told, well, what about Bibi? Bibi needs to resign. In other words, they want to put all the blame on Bibi, and we want to put. We will say sometimes, okay, Bibi has a lot. There's a lot of blame on Bibi, but the main thing is the IDF brass, the leadership of the IDF. No one's resigning. How do we affect this change that is so desperately needed?
First, I think that Bibi has to resign anyhow, and that maybe after the war, but he's blamed also, even though he didn't control the army. He had to control, and because he saw he doesn't control the army, he has to come to the people and say, they don't listen to me. And he didn't. And he failed. But I personally know most of the leadership of the army. Ehud Barak, that is the biggest leader of the leftists that are protesting in Kaplan and all these places. Ehud Barak is the person that, if I want to see one person that is blamed for what is happening in Lebanon today, is Ehud Barak. We were in Lebanon. A lot of my friends died for conquering part of Lebanon. And one day, Ehud Barak, because he had elections, he wanted to be elected again. He wasn't, thank God. He ran out of Lebanon without an agreement, without taking care of the Tzadal, the Arabs that helped us in Lebanon. They were killed by the Hezbollah, by the PLO guys. And because the way he recruited today, we are in this situation we are in Lebanon. And the only way to bring the people back to Metula and Kiryat Shmona and to other places back is to conquer back at least till the Litani River. If not, we wouldn't have quiet, and the people wouldn't go back because they wouldn't feel secure. How many soldiers will have to die again for this because of what he did by running away out of Lebanon? The same Ehud Barak is the guy that started talking about we need a small and smart army. And he was the first one to start closing units in the army. And that's why we have today a lack of soldiers. That's why we have today, we're missing a lot of soldiers. My unit that fought in Lebanon was closed after because they wanted to save money for the salaries of the generals.
But now he maybe has influence from the side, but the army is being run by, let's say, his successors, the people that he promoted in the army. And we in the right wing in the Dati Leumi community have this feeling that you expressed that just like in Beit Mishpat, the people are choosing their own people to take over for them. In the upper echelons of the army, the IDF brass, the generals at that level, the smaller commanders are great people, but the people on top that are making these decisions are all basically being promoted by the people that came before them to continue this view or this direction. How can this be changed?
That the continuation of Eisenkot and Benny Gantz, all these people are people that continued to close units in the army, are people that thought that the Arabs want to have peace or are afraid to make war with us. And all these people are still running the army, and their successors are running the army. Today, in the army, in the leadership of the army, there's 25 generals, alufim. Only one of them is religious, good Jew, Zini. But how could it be that when you go to the colonels in the army, half of them are religious? And after the colonels, after they become colonels, they have to leave the army because, or they become leftists. And
so you're strengthening the problem.
If they don't change their views, they're thrown out of the army. Only leftists could become generals. And we had one of the generals that was in the army was Noam Tibon. Today he talks all over on television every day. Noam Tibon was the commander in charge of Hebron. And I knew him personally. He was a disaster. As a general, one of the worst generals we ever had. And he became chief, almost the chief of staff. And he today talks about his views. He's a leftist, a big leftist. He became aloof. But if he would have had a knitted kippah, and I know today in the army, some of the generals that are running the war in Gaza are religious, but they don't go with the kippah. They took off the kippah because if not, they would have thrown out of the army. And I'm going back, and after you see this, the way that they act towards our people in the army, it's very hard to persuade the Haredim to understand that the army will be nice to them.
Right. But what's the solution?
The solution is to fight. That we are ready to fight in the wars. We have to, but we want to be everybody that's good, even though he's a right wing, could be the chief of staff of the army.
Right.
Not only leftists.
So now you're getting into one solution, which I'm just hearing is a political solution. And this is where I want to now touch on your political career. One solution is the vision that they call this government Yemin Amaleh, a true right-wing government. We all know it's not really a true right-wing government. To try to move in a real right-wing government. And I just want to tell you, the way we first met, I don't know if you remember this, Baruch, was when I first met Aliyah, maybe a year or two afterwards, I saw billboards we were working in Tel Aviv, and I saw billboards with you and Michael Kleiner, Nates, Hachi Yamani, the most right-wing Nates, and I said, I need to meet with these guys. I met with you in Kleiner's office in Tel Aviv, and the three of us sat there and we discussed the future of right-wing politics. So from that, now you didn't pass the threshold then. Part of it was, as I understood, you were bringing in a lot of votes from the Haredi community, and they did some kind of trick. They burned down, the Aguda burned down their own offices, or people thought they did, and then they blamed it on you. I'm not sure. So talk a little bit about that process and how you...
I'll start from that in Israel there's no democracy. Israel isn't a democracy. I don't know if in America it's a real democracy, but in Israel there's no democracy. For the 50 years that I'm involved, I never had real freedom of speech. I never had the real freedom of vote. And, I didn't have always to vote. They wanted me... I wanted to vote for Rabbi Kahane, but they let him run. Why? Because he's a racist. Why Rabbi Kahane is a racist? Because he pointed the problems that Arabs want to kill Jews. Now, he never said all of the Arabs, but if you see that 78% of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria support what happened in Simchat Torah. So you could say that Arabs want to kill Jews, even though you could find an Arab here and an Arab there that doesn't. And the courts run the country. Netanyahu isn't the leader of Israel. The Supreme Court runs the country. Netanyahu doesn't run the army, doesn't run the police, doesn't run the universities, he doesn't run the economy, he maybe runs the Knesset, maybe. And that's not the democracy. In America, when a president gets elected, he decides on all the biggest jobs in the offices that he has. In Israel, the Yoetzet HaMishpatit, the Attorney General, does what she wants. She was elected by a different government. She's appointed by a different government, and she could decide anything she wants politically. She's a politician, and she fights Netanyahu, and it fights everybody. No one could fire her, because if she'll be fired, she'll go to the High Court. The High Court will say you cannot fire her because she's from one of us, and the High Court could decide what bills you could pass in the Knesset and what bills you can't pass in the Knesset. And if you want to pass a bill that also right-wing people could be elected to the High Court, and not only leftist liberals, the High Court will say, no, we know what's good for the army. That's not democracy. And for years, people say that they call the biggest leftist party, Democratic Party, but they could talk about democracy. They're anti-democracy. They're not democratic.
So was there a hope? Now that you've pointed out these problems, the problems with the lack of democracy, the problem of the high court disqualifying true right-wing politicians, the problems of the entrenchment of the left in the army and the court. It seems to me that the only hope is to elect true right-wing politicians in order to change, who aren't afraid to change things, who aren't afraid to push through a judicial reform, who aren't afraid to fire people in the army, who they have the authority to fire the IDF generals if they want to. It'd be very difficult because we're scared. What are they going to do? They're going to burn down the state of Israel. The people demonstrating on Kaplan will bring the state to a halt. We're afraid. But a true fearless leader won't be afraid. Was there hope when Itamar Ben-Gvir, someone who you worked with, a colleague of yours, and I would say a friend of yours, when his party got in, was there hope that he'd be able to change anything?
I want to tell first, our problem isn't, we're not fighting the leftists. The leftists in Eretz Israel are a very small minority. 5%, 10% of the people here are leftists. All the rest are people that were influenced by the newspapers, by the television, radio, and by all kind of. But you have to understand that as anti-Semitism today, people that are against Israel today feel that the way to destroy Israel from the inside is by supporting these leftists. So if they have billions of dollars to fight the governments here, and the right wing doesn't have money to fight them, the right wing has to have money to survive, to build settlements, to build their institutes. So today Qatar is funding. Qatar is an enemy country that is funding the demonstrations in America and funding demonstrations in Israel. And a lot of countries that are against Israel are part of the battle inside Israel. And so we are facing a very, very strong problem, a very big problem. But the reason that the leftists are fighting us very strong is because they know that they have a time limit. They're losing the battle because we have kids, and our kids stay in Eretz Israel, and most of the Aliyat Eretz Israel are people that support religious and right-wing views, and a lot of them are leaving the country. ולא תקיע הארץ אתכם. Eretz Israel pukes on people sometimes. Not everyone has the zchut to live in Eretz Israel. And it's only a question of time that the leadership in Israel will be in the right hands. The question is how much will they destroy? I think that in America, Republicans and Democrats are in the same battle, that they're trying to do things that are against democracy only to leave them in power. So we are in a big battle. The Gaon of Vilna wrote hundreds of years ago that in time of Mashiach, the biggest battle will be against the Erev Rav. And we have here Jews that are ready to help our enemy. Only that we will win the battles. We have Haaretz and other people that are helping their enemy. Every day are getting up and helping our enemy, but we were going to win.
So it's a matter of time.
God is on our side.
So it's a matter of time. We need to stay strong. We need
have
to
to stay
continue.
strong and to be devoted, to bring more olim, to bring more kids, to make their education stronger, to go into the army, to go into all the places, and we'll win in the end. It's only a question of time. When I was in the army, the people from kibbutzim were the leadership of the army, were most of the officers today. Most of the officers that I meet in the army and the best units in the army are religious boys, and they could take one general to in the end, they'll have to give these generals to go to be. And today, after what happened in the war, when they failed, such a big fail, and you see that a lot of them will have to go home. A lot of these very, very, I tell a lot of groups that what strengthened my emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu every day, I know these generals that run the army, run the Shabak, run the Mossad are very, not very strong people. Not the smartest people, not the strongest people, and we're still here. If we're still here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us and helping us. It's a miracle. It's a miracle that we're still here. Things are going to change. The biggest problem with the right wing, what the government, all the parties, included Ben Gvir, none of them have a plan. There's no leadership. We have a lack of leadership, and we have a lack of a plan, what to do, where we want to go. If I would say what's worse than what happened in Simchat Torah, the tragedy that happened there, is one thing even worse. That no one had a plan what to do with the Arabs. The Arabs today, the Arabs in Gaza want to leave. The Arabs a lot of them in Judea and Samaria want to leave. Most of them want to leave, 91%, I think. They want to leave Gaza. And no one has a plan on how to do it. That's what I do all day long. I'm trying to find a way how to help these people, the Arabs, to leave. They talk about humanitarian help. If you want to help him humanitarian, someone doesn't have a house, take him to Europe, take him to an Arab country, to Africa. There's a lot of places to where to go. I chat yesterday with someone that was in the Mossad, a very high rank in the Mossad, and a good Jew. And he told me, the Arabs aren't the problem. Our problem is with the government. The problem is with our leadership of the army, Mossad, Shabak, all these people. If they will only let us work, we could empty most of the people of Gaza would leave. And that's the only way we could win the war. If they stay there, the Hamas stay there.
So being the right-wing representative, so-called right-wing representative in the government, Itamar Ben-Gvir's party, Otzma Yehudit, should they demand that either we promote a plan of resettling Gaza and getting rid of all the terrorists and supporters of terrorists from Gaza? Either you take on that plan and promote that plan, or we're leaving the government. I know this was something we discussed in Kleiner's office.
I want to tell you, I don't like the way Itamar works, because this is a thing. He has to go to Netanyahu quietly. Take with him Bezalel Smotrich. It's also a very serious Jew there. Go together with him to sit with Netanyahu. Tell him, if you know, quietly, not to yell, not to shout, not to make headlines. I work on that every day without headlights. If you want to succeed, Germany needs 2.5 million workers every year. Let's help them. All the Arabs in Gaza are refugees because of Yamach Shimam UNRWA. They left them as refugees. If they land in Germany, they have to take them. They land in France. What could be best for us than having a few more million Arabs in Germany?
Should we insist on that? Because with the claim from the other side is always that you'll topper the government, and who's going to take their place? The left wing. That's always the claim.
Without that, we'll lose the war. If we leave 1 million Arabs, and there are not more than 1 million Arabs in Gaza, the Hamas comes back. And we lost the war. And the Hamas becomes a legend among the Arabs, and will pay a lot. We'll have to fight a lot more and more against the Hamas again.
So we need to insist on this, even if it means the government.
That's the only solution. I'll give you a scoop. That's the solution of the Torah. The Torah says, "V'horashtem et yoshvei haaretz." If you want to throw out, "V'hayu lesikim benechem u'litinim benechem v'tzaru etchem al admatchem," they'll fight against you. You can't leave them inside. These are enemies, Nazi enemies, that every day get up and say, "We want to kill all the Jews."
But how do we but how do we confront the issue of causing the downfall of what's considered to be a right-wing government that can then be replaced?
If they don't do this, they're not a right-wing government. They failed. They failed with this war, and they failed to bring a solution. Nothing else could help us. Mm-hmm. You cannot win Hamas. The only ones that the Speaker of the Army, I agreed with him when he said, Hamas is an idea, you cannot win an idea. You cannot win an idea. The only way we could win Hamas if they wouldn't be around. If they're around, they'll be back. I know as someone that the government, the courts, is fighting us already 50 years. They didn't win us. They banned us from the Knesset. They closed the Kach movement. They filed hundreds of court. They put me a half a year in administrative detention. 3 years I was in house arrest. I never stopped talking.
So I have two. I want to end with two questions because our time is running out. The first question is that we've been talking a lot about the influence of religious people in the army. There used to be, and Michael Kleiner, as far as I know, does not wear a kippah. There was more of a partnership in the right wing. We were able to reach out to the secular right wing. What happened there? Did we fail in our ability to make connections to the secular right wing? There were secular people living in Gaza at the time. There are still some secular yeshuvim or mixed yeshuvim in Yudah v'Shomron. How do we
first we have to know demographic? A third of Yudah v'Shomron is Dati-Leumi, a third is secular, and a third is Haredim. So demographics talk also. We have a lot of, more than half of our supporters are religious. It's not, sometimes someone that isn't religious, it's easier for him that he doesn't ask what this rabbi say, what this yeshiva, we talk logic, he'll support us. The problem of the secular Jews is that they don't have leadership also. And the leadership that they have don't give plans. The leftists all the time have a lot of money and put on the table a lot of plans. The Oslo Agreement, the Vienna Agreement, this place, this plan. They have plans all the time. I didn't hear from any leader in the Knesset or in the government What is going to happen with the Arabs in Gaza? What was going to happen with the Arabs in Judea and Samaria that support Hamas also? The majority of Abu Mazen has a 5% support today. No one supports him. Most of them are for support Hamas. What is going to happen with the Arabs inside Israel? They're the same Arabs. We're not racist. We don't. They're the same families. The families in Gaza and Al-Fahim and Shechem are the same families. And we have to find a solution to these problems. And if we won't find a solution to these problems, they'll explode in our faces the same way they'll explode in the Europeans. In Hebron, they say that in 20 years, they'll finish to conquer Europe. I don't know if it'll happen in all of Europe. I think that in Poland and in Hungary and other places, it'll take more time because they don't let Muslims into their countries. You could see that today the soccer teams of these countries of France and Germany, most of them are Muslims. Most of them aren't Germany aren't Europeans, aren't European. Mm-hmm. And they're conquering slowly Europe. They'll conquer America, that is the biggest Satan, where Israel is the smallest Satan, America is the biggest Satan. They believe in that, and that's the religion. Din Muhammad Basayef, we have to take the sword and conquer the world, and anyone that doesn't become Muslim, to kill him.
So we need to
look at Bethlehem. Bethlehem was known all over the world as a Christian city, right? That's the most important city for the Christians. You know how many Christians live in Bethlehem today? Almost none. They were expelled by the Muslims viciously. The women were raped and they were expelled. They ran away. They fled out. Some of them live in Beit Jala, but Nazrat used to be a Christian city. Today the majority are Muslims. They're taking over everywhere. And not only Jews, Christians are next. And we all have to understand that if we aren't going to find a solution to that problem, this problem will finish us.
Okay, final question, because your time is very valuable. I'm very appreciative that you came and shared some time with us. What's your message now? I know I have a son who's fighting in Rafiah. He's supposed to come home today. I'm sure you have children, grandchildren, whatever, people from your community. What's your message to the young people now who are fighting this war? What do you have to say to them?
First, I think that these are each soldier that's fighting today is fighting the war of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nekom Nikmat Hashem. The wars, everyone that fights the battle is fighting the battles of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only the battles of Am Yisrael. And everyone that fights is part of the Kiddush Hashem, and these are the heroes of Am Yisrael. And I hope that these youngsters, when they come back from the battle, they'll take the leadership of Am Yisrael. They understood what they saw. They understood what's the problem is, and they have to take over the leadership of this country.
Okay, thank you so much, Baruch, for sharing your time with us.
You're welcome.
And wish you much success.
Bezrat Hashem, Geula is on the way. Mashiach is on the way.
Amen.
Everything we're doing is to help a little bit. And I hope that every Jew that all over the world will have the zchut to be here when Mashiach comes.
Amen. Okay, thank you.
Shalom, shalom.